This is the Fantasy Ladder Podcast, episode 22. I'm your host, Steve, at Fantasy Ladder. This podcast is brought to you by the IDP Guys Network from idpguys.org. So, welcome back once again, my fantasy football friends and family. Let's climb the ladder of fantasy football together. So today we have a very special episode. We are continuing our fan base series, and there's just been this ongoing thing where I say we're talking about this team. It's not my team, but today we are talking about my team, which of course is the Philadelphia Eagles. So I am thrilled to talk about my Eagles with three amazing guests. Uh, Nobody likes us, and we don't care. So let's bring on our guests here. We have Steve. You can find him on Twitter at Dynasty Santa. He is the content manager at IDP Guys. He is a brilliant Dynasty mind as far as I'm concerned. He is always dishing out top-notch advice on the IDP Guys Discord, which of course you get access to as a subscriber. So, Steve, how you doing, and how long have you been an Eagles fan?
Excellent, man. Thank you for having me. Doing good. I'm looking forward. We're finally getting real football here soon, so I'm pretty darn excited about that. Been a Birds fan since officially the Chip Kelly era. I was always, you know, conscious of the Birds. My family's originally from Michigan, so we moved here when I was like two. So grew up a fan of Dan Marino and the Dolphins. Always followed the Eagles, saw what Andy Reid and all the turmoil. So I saw all my friends going through that. Marino had been gone for years. So I was like, once Andy Reid's gone, I'm going to dive all the way in. I had my toe in lukewarm before that, but I've been all in since Chip Kelly.
Interesting. Well, you came on at a very fascinating time, my friend.
Yeah,
But
that's for
hey,
sure.
better to have you on board than somewhere else. So you're in here with welcome arms, and I would have never thought that. I would have thought you were just
Yeah.
like born and bred to the way you talk about like the Birds, and especially like your disgust for like the Cowboys and the other
Yeah.
teams in division. It just rolls off your tongue like you're just born into that. But that's great. You've picked it up very well. I would have never known. So that's really fascinating. But that's great. So glad that you're on here. All right, next guest, we're going to bring on Darren. You can find him on Twitter at FFBirdGang. He's a fellow writer at Dynasty Pros, and he also manages the Instagram for Dynasty Pros. So please go check that out. Darren's putting up some awesome content and images up on there. Graphics is the word I was looking for. There it is.
There you go.
So shout out to the community. If you know, you know. Darren is a league mate of mine a couple times over, a very savvy fantasy player and a great friend. So Darren, how you doing, and how long have you been a Birds fan?
Doing great, Steve. Thanks for having me on as a guest. I've been a Birds fan ever since I can remember. Born and raised in Pennsylvania from Lancaster. So I got the love of the Eagles in me from my dad at a very early age and just have kept with them ever since. And I'm glad I'm still riding with them.
So you were brought up in the Andy Reid era, I take it, or
Yes, sir.
gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, so you've seen a lot of the lows and the highs and the lows and the highs again, and now it'd be very interesting to see how it's going to go moving on here. So that's awesome. I'm really
Exactly.
glad you're on the show, and can't wait to hear your thoughts on the Eagles.
Thanks, man.
And last but certainly not least, we have Jason. You can find Jason on Twitter at Spides78. He is the senior writer at Dynasty Nerds. He's an auction draft buddy of mine. And shout out to the Creator League. He is a division rival, along with Steve up there as well. So, Jason, how you doing, and how long have you been an Eagles fan?
I'm doing great, Steve, and thanks as well as the other guests. I appreciate being here with you guys. Looking forward to it. As far as my Eagles fandom goes back to birth, and I know a lot of people will say that. I brought this, so I'm going to hold it up to the screen. That's me
Oh,
at all of
yeah.
about 18 months, and I got my track jacket on and my beanie. I'm ready to rock. So that was probably about 1980. So I've done Buddy Ryan, I've done Rich Kotite, I've done Andy Reid, I've done Chip Kelly, I've done it all. So,
Perfect.
and
Awesome.
I'm still here. So
You're still
haven't
here.
scared me
Yeah.
off yet.
Yeah, I
And I've been
think.
raising. I have two little girls, and I'm raising them from birth the same way. That's kind of the Eagles tradition. So my grandfather passed it on to my dad. He passed it on to me, and got another generation coming right behind. So that's the way it is.
That is the way it is. Yeah. Growing up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, I mean, you get little random patches of Steelers fans here and there. They're kind of everywhere, and of
Yep.
course, like your Cowboys, whatever, but vast majority is Eagles. You're just surrounded by that, so it just was very natural. And then also that came natural there was just the pain that comes with it as well at times. But
Yep.
things have been pretty good as of late. And I am very intrigued for this season. But officially, I became more of a diehard fan, I guess you could say. Um, right around the Reed drafting McNabb era. That was when I really just got into football in general. Before that, we would watch like every Super Bowl, but beyond that, we didn't watch too much. Just some Eagles games every now and then. But I would say football sort of took over as my favorite sport probably around seventh or eighth grade. Started playing fantasy when I was in 10th grade, and then it just exploded from there. So it just was kind of interesting. I remember hearing about like Irvin Fryer, and people like that, but I
Yep.
never like watched too much of that. One of my first football cards was a Randall Cunningham card, so that was pretty cool. First jersey what was a Ricky Waters jersey, but I can't recall actually watching them play, if that makes sense. But
Sure.
definitely grew up in the Andy Reid era, and then of course, Chip Kelly, Doug Peterson, and the peak of that, and now Sirianni. So we'll see how it goes here. But yeah, it's a really interesting thing about fandom. Of course, growing up outside of Philadelphia, it's just if you are born here, you're kind of 4 for 4, and you take, yeah, you really have no choice, unless you want to like not live in the house you grew up in. But no, I'm more than happy. It's a great sports town, and you can enjoy the highs if you've been through the lows. So yeah, it's just one of those things. But yeah, so glad you guys are all on. So excited to be doing this. So we're just going to start basically with a summary of the 2021 season, and then make our way through the free agency, NFL draft picks. Take a look at the year coming up here, but we're going to go back just a little bit. So, 2021 season. Jalen Hurts enters his second season as a professional and his first season as the official starter. The Nick Systems Sirianni era begins with a mostly successful campaign. The Eagles finished with a 9-8 record, which is good enough for second in the NFC East. They made the playoffs, which to me was a pleasant surprise, but had a very humbling departure, getting stomped by the Tom Brady led Buccaneers in the wild card round. As far as fantasy football is concerned, Jalen Hurts had a breakout fantasy season, and the Eagles led the league in rushing touchdowns with 25, but the lead running back Miles Sanders didn't score a single one. So hopefully, something gives there this year. But after the big offseason that they've had, I am very excited for this year. But once again, as a Philadelphia fan, I always want to kind of temper my expectations. It's hard for me to not be enthusiastic. So, guys, what is your level of anticipation like for this season? We'll start with you, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, certainly building off of last year would be fantastic. I'm a bit of a pessimist at heart, but so that whole limping into the playoffs and then getting smashed out just like that, I almost feel like it would have been better to not make the playoffs. But I think this year, what does it all hinge on? Obviously, Hurts taking a step forward. So I think if he can actually take those steps and they've loaded him up with weapons, so it's really no excuses time. So I'm actually way more optimistic this year than I was last year. Like you said, it was a bit of a pleasant surprise. So I think there's room to be and cause to be optimistic for this year for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. My level of anticipation going into last year was extremely neutral, because
Yeah, same.
I was not thrilled with the Sirianni hire. Some of the guys I was hoping for got hired very early in the process, but he just seemed to be like a guy who just to me just wasn't much of a candidate. But it doesn't matter anymore. But so I just
Yeah.
really wanted to like go in as neutral as possible and just really have a good eye on Hurts's development. Because we had a lot of draft picks going into the following season, just see what he can do. Can we build around him and all this? But I just can't help but have higher expectations because of the additions and, in my opinion, like the wide path to the division success and hopefully the playoffs. So how about you, Darren? Is it just same old, like just hype as always for the Birds, or are you trying to kind of keep it grounded a little bit, or what do you think?
I mean, year after year, it's kind of hard to tell how I was feeling last year, but I'm an optimist. My expectations are always high. I love getting my dreams shattered at the end of the year, so I'm just kind of used to it at this point. But I have high expectations for us this year, and it's not, from a win perspective, but I want to see some of these younger guys taking steps forward and hopefully live up to their potential of where we drafted them at or what their expectations are now. Like, love to see some of these rookies and second year players take a step forward. And I like what you said about Sirianni, because I was kind of feeling the same way last year. But I really like how he's adopted the culture in Philly, and he's out there wearing the T-shirts in camp. And even though he got made fun of last year, he's still doing it again this year, which I love because he doesn't care what the people say. So I think at least he's adopting the Philly culture, and it's a guy we can build around.
I love that. Yeah. So Jason, obviously, we're all fantasy players. We're all big time football fans. How is it for you? Is this just like business as usual, hype for the Birds, or are you more of the optimist like Darren, or more of the pessimist like Steve? Are you somewhere in the middle?
It's
Where
funny
you at?
because hearing them both describe themselves, I think I have elements of both in my personality. I don't think you can be an Eagles fan without equal parts optimism and negativity. I
Yeah.
mean, you go into a game, you think we're going to win by 50. When you get down by 7, we're never going to win another game. That's the Eagle fan mentality, 100%. But on a macro level, just looking at the season, I think, for me, I'm just excited to have expectations back, whether we fulfill them or not. It's just like you described last year, the feeling going in was kind of like, well, let's just wait and see. This year, it's not just, our fan base. I think outside nationally, we're looked as a favorite or as a contending team, which, you guys all mentioned the Andy Reid era. That was a good solid decade where every year they were expected to at least contend, whether or not they won a championship. It was like you were going to be in it. You were a playoff team. And I mean, looking at the offseason that the Eagles have had, you have to think they're aimed in that direction. Now, as Steve said, it all hinges on Jalen. If he makes a step forward, then so do the Eagles. And if he doesn't, they've got problems. But even as it pertains to him, I love what Howie Roseman did in this offseason by punting one of those first round picks into the next year's draft, because now he's got draft capital next year and he's got a contingency. If Jalen doesn't deliver, and he can't be a passer in addition to a scrambler, then they can look elsewhere. They don't have to pay him that huge contract and they don't have to re-up him. So they've given themselves options even beyond this season. So it's really exciting to see the red lights blinking, Jalen. Like, what's it going to be? You going to be the franchise quarterback, or are we looking elsewhere next year? That's the whole season for me.
I like this new Howie Roseman strategy of trading away draft picks for proven commodities, since he stinks at drafting at least offensive players most of the time. So I was pretty pleased for that.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with your assessment, Steve.
Cap wizard, I love him for that, but man, oh man, the offensive draft picks have got to start panning out.
Yeah, well, you know what's funny? You mentioned Howie Roseman. It kind of dovetails to what I started my statement with, which is that the highs and lows, the roller coasters of being an Eagles fan. That's the same roller coaster that public opinion rides with Howie Roseman. Yeah. He makes a good trade. He signs a player in free agency. Everybody loves him. Jalen Reagor shows up at training camp and is a disaster. Everybody's like, when can we run this guy out of town? I mean, and it's remarkable that he's been in town for, what is it, like 15 years now? And he's just constantly in the gallows or like, being carried off the field on somebody's shoulder. Like, there's no in between with that guy. And there's nobody's neutral at any given time about Howie. It's like he's hated, he's vilified, or he's loved. And that's it.
Yeah, it was very interesting because like during that Chip Kelly era, he kind of had to take a step back because Chip Kelly wanted all the like power, if you will, to make all these moves, and a lot of those moves were questionable at the time, but especially in hindsight, so it just was very interesting. He kind of had to kind of like humble himself, allow Laurie to kind of see the Chip Kelly thing through, and then he goes away. They bring in Peterson. Brilliant move after brilliant move to set them up for that Super Bowl run. And they still won despite losing Carson Wentz, who was like the start. I mean, it just was amazing. It just was brilliant. And then he kind of had a much longer leash because of that, when he's missed out on some of these draft picks and things that we've already discussed with Jalen Rager and of course JJ Arcega-Whiteside, and then the list kind of goes on. But yeah, so it is very fascinating. He was a busy guy this offseason. I thought maybe that the trade before the draft with the Saints was going to be it. Like, that was his big move. Oh, no, there was a lot more action, especially just on draft night, just on night one. It was insane. So we'll get to that in just a bit. But the comment you made, Jason, about it's just good to have expectations again. I just had my sights set on seeing what Jalen Hurts can do in his first season as a starter. And I just really was just looking forward to the draft because we had all that capital going into the season. And then a little bit of a rough start there. It took Nick Sirianni a little while to get a hold of the offense and then really doing extremely well with like the rushing attack. And then I'm like, well, I think I just would rather have a team that is actually successful and winning than just kind of focusing on the draft pick. So it just was this really weird shift that I experienced through the course of last season. But yeah, where I started in August was not where I ended in, well, I guess like December was good, and then January then wasn't so good as we lost as embarrassingly as we did in Tampa Bay. But yeah, so it's a very interesting journey being a fan for sure. So what we're going to do is just kind of review some of the Eagles free agency moves. Then we'll get into the draft and then look ahead to the next season here. Some of the most notable moves, losses, and additions in free agency. If I missed anything, fellas, please speak up and let me know. Key losses for me was linebacker Alex Singleton, defensive tackle Hassan Ridgeway, and safety Rodney McLeod. Additions, of course, was the draft day trade acquiring wide receiver AJ Brown. They also brought in wide receiver Zach Pascal. They brought in outside linebacker Hassan Reddick, cornerback James Bradbury, linebacker Kazir White, and safety Jaquiski Tart, who had high draft capital once upon a time, but the last time we saw him on the field, he was dropping the interception that would have put the 49ers in very good position to make it to the Super Bowl. But either way, if we can get a safety on the cheap, maybe just as like that McLeod replacement, I'm okay with it. Of course, the Eagles did retain Fletcher Cox, Derek Barnett, Anthony Harris, a bunch of veterans on the defensive side. They brought back Boston Scott, fan favorite, and the literal GOAT himself, Jason Kelsey, whose jersey I'm wearing here. He stays with the team. So, guys, what are your thoughts on these free agency moves? Were there any other positions or specific players you were hoping the team would have signed? Darren, we'll start with you.
I think we did a really good job in free agency, and the main thing was some of the guys that we lost, we found a way to replace them, and maybe it's not 100% permanent replacement, but we did get guys in there. I don't think we really have too many gaps that we need to fill in, and there's a lot of guys here that I think are very talented and could make a huge impact this year.
Yeah, the one that really stuck out, I mean, other than like the AJ Brown one, was James Bradbury. To have like a presence on the cornerback position opposite of Darius Slay, I just think is awesome. I think like Avonte Maddox can be best utilized as like a slot corner or whatever. But I thought that was really solid to shore up that. How about you, Jason? Was there did you like these signings, or was there players you would have thought the Eagles should have went with?
I think by and large, you got to give top marks to the front office for the offseason that they've had. Obviously, the headlining move is AJ Brown. I think, he's obviously a great player, but I think what he does is he changes the whole demeanor of, at least offensively, of the team. He's got like an alpha mentality that I don't know that they've had since
Mhm.
maybe like T.O. on this team. I
Mhm.
mean, he's definitely got that my ball. He's got a veteran. I mean, he's been in the league, I don't know what, 3 years now. So he's going to be able to take some of these younger guys under his wing and teach them how to be pros. I mean, Devontae Smith is obviously out of that Alabama pedigree, so he already kind of has a semi-pro background coming out of Alabama. But even so, these are young guys that like they needed a veteran presence, even if it was just an average skilled veteran. But now they've got a veteran with top skill that can back up what he's telling them with his performance on the field. I mean, that changes the whole complexion of your offense in my mind. And I mean, yeah, I would have liked maybe a little bit more at safety, but I'm glad that they got Tart. I think he helps them quite a bit. He at least gives them depth, even if he's not going to start. I'm not I'm not as bullish on Anthony Harris. So I really like that they've got options there now and they're not forced to use him. Obviously, also Kavon Wallace hasn't really worked out as a draft pick like
Right.
the way that they would have liked. So now with Tart on board, I mean, I know he's got that ugly moment in the NFC Championship game that you mentioned, but by and large, he's been a pretty good player in the league. And really, he's only been limited by injuries. Injuries have really cost him. Um, from an IDP standpoint, he was a top asset as recently as 2 years ago. And it's just he's missed, not only had injuries, but missed large chunks of games, which really, I think that's why the Niners probably didn't retain him because they're worried about his availability. But for the Eagles to get him that late in the offseason, I think that was a really under the radar addition that can help them and go a long way. Similar to what happened in 2017, they were making additions to that team very late in the off season and into like July and August that panned out. And Patrick Robinson was a major part of their Super Bowl run, and he was kind of like an afterthought at the time. Nobody really thought, well, so what? So this guy's going to be a camp body, and they'll cut him, in 3 weeks. And next thing you know, he's returning a pick six in the NFC Championship game. So
That's right.
hopefully, some of these guys kind of have that same long-term performance, and we can see them, living some glory in January.
Yeah, and I love it. How about you, Steve? Was there any players you were hoping the Eagles would have signed, or are you very happy with the crop that they were able to bring in?
Yeah, I don't know that they missed out on anybody. Maybe instead of a tart or in addition to a tart, a honey badger would have been nice. I know there was like rumors there for a little hot minute before he actually signed in New Orleans. Other than him, I can't really think of anybody crazy to miss out on. I don't know that I would consider Alex Singleton a key loss. That's sort of he's great for, so we play IDP. He's great for
Mhm.
IDP
Right.
fantasy football, not an actual good linebacker. Wouldn't have minded if we didn't bring back Derek Barnett either. I feel like he's a little expensive for what he actually produces on the field.
Mhm.
I think we've got a better version and a cheaper version of Derek Barnett in Josh Sweat already. So maybe we, let him walk and grab somebody else. I know Randy Gregory, but he got a ridiculous contract from Denver for his age. So if that's what it would have cost to get him, probably pass on that too. So yeah, other than the honey badger, nothing crazy that we missed out on, and I think we replaced everyone, like everyone was saying here, with some almost upgrades at all the major people that we lost, I would say.
Yeah, it was
For
interesting. It was
Jason,
like, oh, go for it. Yeah.
sorry, Steve. For Jason's point, as far as credit to the front office, it always seemed like our name was in the mix for every one of those big free agent
Yep.
guys that came out. At least like
Every
on
year
Twitter,
that
it
happens,
was
right?
Schefter reporting up the Eagles are in the mix to get this guy. So like they were just hungry this offseason to just sign some good guys here.
Yeah, definitely. It was funny, like about Tyrann Mathieu. It was like he's taking a flight to Philadelphia, and now he's taking a flight to New Orleans. It's like, well, what are we going to hear? Like, what he's eating in the airport too? It just was like ridiculous. But he was a guy that I thought would have brought like a lot, like a solid like leadership role in the secondary. I don't know. I just have always been like a fan of him. So I thought that would have been cool. Prior to the AJ Brown trade, I had my eyes on Jarvis Landry.
Mm.
I guess he just was wanting like too much money in that early process of free agency. Then I guess he lands in New Orleans for a pretty reasonable deal. So a very good fit for him for that team. But I still would have liked him in Philadelphia too. But I've been a big fan of his for a long time. Plus, I think he would have been pretty instrumental in helping Jalen Hurts just kind of up his accuracy and up his his accuracy, his completion percentage. But I think AJ Brown can do what he can do plus a whole lot more. So I'm okay with that. But he was a player I had my eyes on for a bit. But anything to add on the free agency, fellas?
I'll
Bobby
just say,
Wagner
oh,
too would have been
But
cool.
yo,
oh yeah,
absolutely.
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, they Kaiser White. Nah, I'm not even totally sold on him yet, but we always seem to have issues at linebacker. So bringing in a stud, I can't remember what his deal actually was in Los Angeles, but I feel like it wasn't anything out of the ordinary or astronomical. So that would have been cool.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
have
I
to
think
think Bobby
yeah.
Wagner probably wanted to stay in that division too, and probably
Yeah.
take it to Seattle a little bit. Plus, he's going to a team that just won the
Very
Super
true.
Bowl, so he's in the twilight of his career. So those are probably factors for him too. Like they probably would have had to way overpay him to come out
Yeah, he
east.
probably took a discount.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
Steve, to your
absolutely.
Jarvis Landry point, I was just going to also mention we didn't talk about Zach Pascal, but he's an actual. He has that leadership in him. He's got experience with Sirianni coming from Indianapolis.
Oh,
He's
there you go.
obviously not the player that
right.
Jarvis Landry is or has been, but I think he can kind of give you some of the same attributes out of the slot and get those tough yards and kind of also what I said about AJ Brown earlier. He also has that veteran leadership that he can kind of raise the room a little bit. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about before, I guess he got food poisoning. So he's been missing a couple of the training camp practices. But prior to that, whenever they ran a wide receiver drill, he was like first in line and he was like executing just the way that the coaches wanted it. And it was like that's the kind of stuff you don't see on Sundays, but he's demonstrating to his teammates like this is how we do our work. You know, this is how we go about it. This isn't fun and games out here. We have very few, minutes in a day of practice time, and we're going to use all of them. So I think just having those types of standards set by those guys is going to go a long way towards elevating the group overall.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think he automatically can come in and be like a better option than what like Jalen Reagor has shown to this point. It's as sad as sad as that whole thing has been. And again, he's making like the big circus catches again in training camp, just like he did last year. He's got to do it in the regular season, but I think with the additions, we just aren't going to need to rely on him as much as what we've had to in the past, or at least have him on the field as much. So I
Right.
just think I'm very happy with the track that the team is going in here.
Just
But
to go on a bit of a tangent with Rager, just to get the feel of the group. I just mentioned Zach Pascal. We've obviously got the top three in Brown, Smith, and Watkins. So Rager's looking like at best the wide receiver 5 on this roster. I'm thinking, Steve, you mentioned Howie is a trade magnate. I mean, as we get to the end of camp here, I just can't. First of all, I can't see Rager being satisfied with being a wide receiver 5 as a former first-round draft pick. So he's going to be a problem. And there's teams around the league like the Bears who have already been rumored as being interested in him. At this point, I mean, I hate to be like hyperbolic, but I take whatever I can get for him and I just move on because I know he's got talent. It's in him. He wouldn't have been a first-round pick without some level of athleticism. But right now, I think he's just going to disrupt what they've got going as far as team chemistry. And I just worry that like he's not going to buy in as given his role now on the team. And I think it's just time to give him a fresh start, to his benefit and get whatever we can for him before we're cutting him next year or, he has to be released because what value is he really providing to this roster as a fifth receiver?
yeah, no, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, the camp news coming out is all positive, so that's almost kind of like an inkling, like, oh, look what we have. He's still here. Like, you guys can come and get him when you want him, So I feel like that's kind of some of that news coming out has got to be related to that.
Yep. Yeah, I think Howie's blowing the smoke pretty hard. Like, look at we have a first-round talented receiver here. He's making great catches. I think you're absolutely right.
maybe Pascal has food poison, or maybe he has food poisoning just to give Rager an
Extra
opportunity
reps.
to be in the spotlight,
Wow.
so
Now we're
that
like
Howie
in
can do his thing.
really deep conspiracy theories here. I
That's
like
right.
it.
That's right.
They're
Yeah.
showcasing it.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Us. Well, me. I can't speak for the rest of you, but so some of us fans in Philly just are not rational thinkers. But anyway, but we have a good time anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah. So obviously, the free agent moves were quite significant. Every show I've done, most of everyone has said how jealous of the moves that the Eagles have been making. So I don't know. It is very exciting. It's very nice to be like the envy of a lot of these other teams and fans and things. But free agency is only one way to build a roster. The other is through the draft. So just going to review some of their draft picks, and then we can discuss what we liked or what we didn't like with these picks. So in the first round, pick 13, the Eagles traded up from 15. With the Texans to jump up ahead of Baltimore to get defensive tackle Jordan Davis, the big boy, the big freakish athlete from that amazing Georgia defense. Then at pick 18, of course, they made the move for A.J. Brown with the Titans. Along with that trade, gave A.J. Brown that contract extension that the Titans likely may not have been wanting to do. So just kind of created one of these tough business decisions that the Titans obviously went with the way of Treylon Burks there. But then in the second round, pick 51, Eagles take offensive lineman Cam Jurgens, and he got the endorsement from Jason Kelsey. So that gets me very excited. Pick 3, or round 3, pick 83, the Philadelphia Eagles select linebacker Nakobe Dean from Georgia, of course. Just another stud from that unit. Then a couple of sixth-round picks, linebacker Kyron Johnson and tight end Grant Calcaterra. So, guys, what do we think about this draft class? Did you have a favorite or a least favorite pick? What are your thoughts there, Jason?
I guess, well, I'm twofold on my favorites. My most favorite would be the trade to get A.J. Brown, but I already talked about that. So I'll say, other than that, I like the Jordan Davis pick. I'm actually more than I would say I am intrigued by it because of what I think it means for where their defense is heading schematically. I think that tells me that they're going to be more multiple in their fronts. They're going to use a little bit more of like a 5-2 front or a 3-4 front. He's going to occupy two guys up front because he's just a beast. And I don't know that he's going to give the pass rush stats that you need as an IDP. If you're in defensive tackle required leagues, I don't know that he's going to be a top scorer, but in real football, he's going to really be disruptive. I can envision them using Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox next to him in a 3-4 stack and just having all three of those guys go after the quarterback. Now, good luck if you're an offensive line coach trying to scheme up how to stop those three coming at you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a mess. So I know a lot of people are just in love with his size and how he's got a unique personality and he's lovable. He's adapted to the Philly fandom already. I just love, from a football sense, because we ran a little bit of 3-4 under Chip Kelly, and it was a little bit of a disaster because they tried to implement it too soon before we had the players to really kind of facilitate it. But I really think with the increase in talent with our linebacking core and now having a front that can really sustain it, I don't think they're going to run a base 3-4 or a 5-2, but I think you're going to see a lot more of it. And it really gives Jonathan Gannon the freedom to kind of mix and match his fronts from week to week. It makes it very hard for opposing offenses to scheme against the Eagles because you really don't know what kind of looks are they going to give us. Are they going to come at us with, these three horses up front? Are they going to play a 4-3? I have no idea. So you've got to prepare for everything, which ultimately just thins out your preparation and makes you less prepared when it's game day. So Jordan Davis as a player, he's great. But what I love about it is with them using that high of a capital, they recognized that we've got to change some of the things that we were weak on in defense last year. And I think it means big things for them going forward. So I'm really intrigued as a defensive enthusiast. I want to see what they're going to do and how they're going to wreak havoc against some of their opponents this year.
Absolutely. How about you, Darren? Favorite or least favorite pick?
My favorite pick It's Jordan Davis for sure. I mean, I played defensive line when I was in high school, so that's always been my passion. And just a man that big being able to move that fast is just the most intriguing thing ever, like Jason was saying. And I think he's going to just be a fantastic addition. And even if he's not getting first team reps right away because he's a rookie, he's just making everyone at camp that much better because of the tough competition. I don't know if you guys saw that video surface of, I'm not sure who it was. It was Cam Jurgens or Nate Herbig maybe that he was going up against in the stadium there, and all he did was just lean his weight on him, pushed him back about 5 times. So yeah,
he was doing the bunny hop, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's the one. Yeah, I saw it.
And then I also
they had that video of it. Sorry, and then they had the video of it playing in reverse, so it looked like the offensive lineman was like pushing him backwards. So like the internet is so stupid. But anyway, sorry. Yeah, you were saying. Yeah,
I just like how we consistently take offensive linemen high in the draft. We prioritize that. We pride ourselves on having a great offensive line, and that's really where the offense stems from is, can we protect Jalen Hurts? And Hurts isn't going to be able to take that step forward without an upgraded offensive line. And obviously with some of our veterans getting older, I'm just glad that we consistently bring in those young guys to step up there. And a lot of them have worked out so far. Some teams you see consistently take skill players in the top rounds that don't end up working out, and then they end up with a really good quarterback that can't be protected because they didn't prioritize the offensive line.
Absolutely. How about you, Steve? And any of the picks stick out to you?
I'll take Nakobe Dean then. Just it seems like an incredible value. So as a fantasy player, who loves value-based drafting, that was great. Trading up for Jordan Davis, a couple of picks, kind of hurts, but I get it. It's still a great pick. But I think the value we got on Dean was really amazing. And a sneaky favorite, I think Calcaterra, the tight end, could be a valuable weapon in a couple of years, whether Goddard is still there or not. I think he's got a profile that will lend itself to being potentially one of those late round gems that hit in year 2 or 3 after sitting and learning a couple of years. So those are probably my 2 favorites.
Yeah, for me, it was far and away Dean, because I mean, he just kind of profiles as a linebacker that our team just has not had in a very long time. I'm not going to compare him to like Trotter or anything, but like we just haven't had that like solid force to be reckoned with middle linebacker in a long, long time. So I just was so pumped. I actually thought that they were gonna look his way in the second round. I'm like, oh no, what are they doing? And then I kind of came around on the Jurgens pick, and then round 3, I was sitting right in this basement. I like literally put both hands up when like I saw the pick come through the phone. I'm like, yes. So I just was beyond thrilled about that. And I don't know. I guess like maybe he fell. There was like some question marks around his like health or something, like a pectoral thing. I don't know. And then it seemed like Eagles were like, you seem fine to us. It's like, well, okay, so whatever. So yeah, I mean, I was absolutely pumped about that. Yeah. Did you guys have any favorite undrafted free agents, or is that something you kind of like not even worry about, or anything stick out to you there?
I think we'll be able to see after cuts are made who's going to be an impactful player that was added. And at this time, I haven't really dug into that too much, thinking that, these guys might not even make the team yet. So.
Right. Yeah, it's always as like a shot in the dark, right? But I mean, for who they brought in, I did like uh Kennedy Brooks. I think like he's a solid, like just a running back to have to the rotation. And then Carson Strong, who obviously didn't get drafted, I guess it just was too many question marks around his knee, I guess it was that he had hurt at one point in time. But I think, hey, that's a solid add there too. I mean, obviously if they don't work out, they don't work out, but it's like, ooh, that kind of got me a little excited.
Yeah, I would agree on. I was going to mention Carson Strong as well, so I'm glad you brought him up, Steve. And whether he pans out, just like you said, to me is irrelevant. It shows that they're always looking. You know what I mean? Like we'll go back to the quarterback factory quote from a couple of years ago when Jalen got drafted. But it's true. I mean, they're always looking for a developmental quarterback. They are never satisfied. I mean, you think back to guys like AJ Feely that they flip for picks. And I mean, they've always prioritized developing quarterbacks and moving them because they're the most valuable commodity in the league. And so just that mentality that they're out there looking and they're not satisfied. Okay, we've got Jalen Hurts and we've got Minshew. Like, we don't need a quarterback. They were like, they paid big time money, guaranteed money to Strong, for at least for a UDFA, to come in
Right.
here. And that tells me they're not content. They're never content at quarterback. They always want to add another arm. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Like a pro comp I had for Strong was actually Nick Foles. I think they're like a very similar type of player. I mean, I'm not predicting that like Strong is gonna like grind his way into the league and like be a starter and win a championship, but a very similar type of player, big arm, not necessarily mobile, but mobile enough to be able to escape pressure and extend plays. So mostly a pretty careful. With the ball, he didn't turn the ball over a ton and had, good passing numbers and things like that. So just as far as a free player, I was very happy with that. But some years you look at who they bring in, you're like, never heard of them. I have no idea.
Mhm.
But this year it just kind of especially stuck out to me because it is just very fascinating, like how the NFL values the same players that we watch and that we are researching and stuff. Like the one pick that like really blows my mind was like Sam Howell lasting all the way to the top of the fifth round. I I just literally couldn't believe it. Like I just like
Mhm.
really well the whole quarterback class was just a fascinating one in general. And the NFL like just didn't value them the same way as the NFL draft hype machine did. But I guess a lot of that's typical. But I really thought that there could have been a possibility that two or three of those guys may have gone in the first round, but Howell in the fifth round, I just like really couldn't believe it. Just
Don't get
fascinating
me
to me.
Yeah.
started.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you're a big Howell guy, but yeah, it's just insane to me. Like I think Washington unfortunately got a pretty good or could have a pretty good value there, which I don't like, but good for them. But
Yeah.
anyways,
I think my whole read on that quarterback situation was it seemed like there was probably like 4, maybe 5 clubs that really could use a quarterback. And there was 4 or 5 guys that they probably valued equally. And they just like you do, you mentioned value-based drafting, Steve, earlier,
Mhm.
like that they all said, I'll take any one of those 5 and I'm just going to
Yeah.
play, I'm going to play chicken. And that's what they all did. They just were like round after round. Like, I'm not going to be the first
It,
to take one. You be the first to take one. And then we waited and waited and waited. But that doesn't, to me, that doesn't diminish the talent of any of those players. It just was it was a
yeah, I agree.
situational thing that there was only so many vacancies, and the NFL smart, like they're not going to pay these guys, the
Mhm.
slotted salary that they'd have to pay them in the first or second round when they can pay them in, with a fifth round salary. And if they don't
Mhm.
work out, they cut them and they move on. They've got no investment then at that point. So I I,
Yeah.
I don't, I'm not ready to give up, I guess, on what I'm saying on the quarterback class overall. I just think it was largely
Mhm.
circumstantial.
Mhm.
yeah, for sure. All right, guys. So we're going to take a look ahead to the 2022 season. After taking a look at the schedule, what do you guys think are realistic expectations in terms of wins and loss records? The current over under right now is at 8.5 wins, and the Cowboys are currently favorites for the division. So what do you guys think is a realistic expectation for wins and losses? We'll start with you. We'll start with you, Steve.
Can you remind me what AFC group we have that
Uh,
we face this year?
We face the AFC North. I know that much.
Ugh.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
It could be 2 wins, 2-2 maybe.
yeah, I think that's realistic. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, 8.5. We've won 9. I mean, we won 9 last year, and we're supposed to improve. So I guess I got to go over. I certainly, Cowboys. I think have lost heck of a lot more than we have. So I would take us to win the division over them specifically for sure. But knowing the NFC Beast, the shitty Giants or Washington Commanders will come out of nowhere and win, because that's just how this division goes. But no, I mean, realistically, on paper, I think we have the best roster on both sides of the ball pretty easily. So yeah, 9-10 wins at least seems pretty feasible for sure. Yeah, like I said, facing the AFC North there, I guess it depends when we play Cleveland and how that whole situation shakes out. But I think a Cleveland and a
I did
Pittsburgh game.
misspeak. I did
Okay.
misspeak. I was assuming the AFC North because I knew we had that game against Pittsburgh, but it is AFC South.
Okay.
So,
Oh, now that's
so
good.
it's a little gentler. Yeah, a little gentler there.
Yeah.
But got that random Pittsburgh game, and which is always fun. You know, have a
Okay.
little
Okay.
Pennsylvania, rivalry. So
Yeah.
that's my bad. But no, that the Browns
Yeah.
would be a very fascinating one to watch, of course, with the ongoing situation there. But yeah, so week 1, it's the Lions. Week 2, Vikings. Week 3, Commanders. Week 4, Jags. Week 5, Cardinals. Week 6, Cowboys. By week 7, then Steelers, Texans, Commanders, Colts, Packers, Titans, Giants, Bears, Cowboys, Saints, Giants. I think there's a possibility that they can go 4-2 before the bye week, and then I have them finishing at 9-8.
Okay.
So I would take the over, but just barely.
Yeah. Right.
But I guess like my only question is if we go 9-8 again, if that's good enough for the playoffs again. So I'm not 100% sure. How about you, Darren? Where do you see them ending this year?
So I think they beat the 8.5 wins, and like I said, I'm always optimistic about the season.
Yeah.
But I really do feel strongly about them beating 8.5 wins. Last year we were 9-8 with a team that was significantly worse with less weapons last year. Still somehow managed to squeak into the wild card. And I'm with Steve that I think the Cowboys are a bit overhyped this year. And I know it sounds bad coming from an Eagles fan, but they lost weapons, whereas the Eagles are gaining weapons like A.J. Brown, and the Cowboys have lost, Amari Cooper. They just had James Washington go down, I believe. So they're just, have seemed to lost pieces while we have gained pieces. And I think that's going to make a difference this year.
Definitely. How about you, Jason? Any predictions on the record?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, I'm over that 8.5 big time. I wouldn't say massively. I'm going to say 10-7. That's my prediction. Okay. I'm going to say it's enough to win the division at 10-7. I do think they're better than Dallas. I think, we've already talked about how Dallas has lost pieces. Where I think it's lost in the media is Dallas's offensive line is not the dominant force that it once was, 2-3 years ago. I mean, they're vulnerable. And if we've got now Jordan Davis on our line and we're bullying people around with our front, that makes a big difference in a game. We talked about it earlier, but the Eagles have always prioritized the trenches, whether it's on defense or offense. And if you look at, the defensive line depth that they have right now, and then you look at how strong the Eagles offensive line is, I think that's the hallmark of this team, and that's why I feel they'll be strong enough to win the division. I mean, I know A.J. Brown gets the headlines, and I already talked at length about how excited I am to have him on the roster. But really, football games are won in the trenches, and I think the Eagles have the strongest, units on the defensive and offensive line.
Gotcha. So do you think that their only path to the playoffs would be winning the division, or do you think they could get one of the wild card spots with a, say, 9-8 or 10-7? Any thoughts on that, guys?
I mean,
I would say we could go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I would say that, we made it again at 9-8, and I think that the NFC is going to struggle more than the AFC is going to be this year, whereas in the AFC, the wild card is going to be a lot tougher competition. And I think we could find a way in there at 9-8, but, obviously our best shot is to win the division. And it's definitely possible that us or the Cowboys could sneak into the wild card, but it's no guarantee. So I think winning the division should be the top priority here.
Yeah, it is such an odd division. Obviously, you guys are probably aware of this fact, but no team has repeated as division champion since the Eagles did it from the years 2001 to 2004. I do think it's possible that the Eagles win it. At worst, I think the Cowboys do get one of the wild card spots. So I think it's very possible that the same two teams can get back into the playoffs. But it is such an odd division. Like I just
Yeah.
don't realistically see the Giants getting to that level, at least in year one of Brian Dabble.
Yeah.
I think he's not really the issue, it's just more of like a Daniel Jones issue. And then with Washington, back to back seasons of 7 wins, uh, I'm not sure if Carson Wentz can get them back over that hump. I know they still have a pretty solid defense. Chase Young might not be back right away. I'm not sure exactly what his timeline or what his time frame is like, but yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's our division. At least it's the success or lack thereof really just kind of falls on us. I'm not super concerned about the division as a whole. Obviously, Dallas, yes, but and you don't want to overthink like our division opponents because those games
Yeah.
can be just really ugly sometimes, obviously. But yeah,
Only one team's making it to the playoffs from this division this year.
okay.
So if it's either going to be us or the Cowboys, but I think the Cowboys take a major step back. We go forward. Wentz couldn't take a severely more talented roster of the Colts to the playoffs last year, so I don't think he's going to be able to in Washington. And if Daniel Jones is your quarterback, you're not winning more than 6 or 7 games. So
I would tend to agree with that for sure. So very cool. All right. So we do, at the end of the day, want this show to be a fantasy football show, but I do enjoy just the general football talk as well. So here's what we're going to do. Looking at just Eagles players, we're going to go. We're gonna go around here. Players to target at projected cost, and right now, right? Like it could be very different. Like a whole month from now, like when drafts will still be happening. You can go dynasty, you can go redraft, you can throw in some IDPs, whatever you want to do. Players to target, and then players to fade. So let's start with players to target. Darren, how about you kick us off?
Obviously, I think Jalen Hurts is going to be a top fantasy asset this year. His rushing abilities, his added weapons, I think he gets more work in the passing game, has some more opportunities at passing touchdowns rather than running it in himself. But I think that at cost, he's going to be a guy that has top 5 potential that you can draft outside of the top 5. And as far as fading, this isn't a huge fade, but I think we should temper expectations on A.J. Brown coming in his first year. You can't really expect him to just blow up right away and take him in redraft as a top guy and expecting him to be that number one. We're not even sure how the passing situation is going to shake out yet. And at cost, I really like Devontae Smith better, that you can get a few rounds later, that has easily the same upside as A.J. Brown does. Who knows? It could shake out that he becomes Hurts' target once A.J. Brown steals the top corner away. So I like Devontae Smith in redraft. Obviously, A.J. Brown is going to be a top dynasty pick for me rather than a redraft league. But that's where I'm at right now.
I like that distinction. I was having like a similar thought about that today because in one redraft league I already did. I got AJ Brown at 210 as my wide receiver one. This was like a single QB league, so it was me. It's maybe more me just like wanting to get like a bit of the action there. But I think he was probably like wide receiver 8 or something, so I didn't like hate that spot for him. But I did just want to have a little bit of rooting interest in him there. But I do like, because of that, I think it is a tremendous buying opportunity for Smith. So I like that call a lot. How about you, Jason? You got any players you're targeting or fading on the Eagles?
It's funny because I was going to go with Devontae Smith as well, and I think exactly for the reasons that we talked about.
Perfect.
I think AJ Brown is going to attract a lot of the attention. Teams are going to scheme to stop him. I mean, I certainly would. So now Devontae Smith goes from that guy last year, where he was the guy getting all the attention and getting the top corner that he was facing, to he's facing the secondary corner, or they can work him across the field and they can find holes in the zone for him. And he's already got a connection with Jalen Hurts. I mean, he's put in a whole season with him. So they're not building that chemistry like he's going to have to build with Brown on the fly this year. He's already got an established relationship with Smith. I think I was looking this up earlier today because I'm actually writing an article on the Eagles, and Devontae Smith's actually coming off ADP at like the 36th highest receiver right now. And to me, if you're going to get Devontae Smith at low end, wide receiver 3 value, I'll take that every day. So, exactly to the point that Darren made, why would I pay wide receiver 1 cost for AJ Brown when I could pay the low end wide receiver 3 cost for Devontae Smith and potentially get the same output? And then, to talk about your fades, I've already kind of touched on this earlier, but I'll go to the IDP side and I'll talk about Jordan Davis as a fade for me. Not because I don't like him as a player or I don't like his personality. I think he's an impressive guy. I think he's going to be a force on a football field. I just don't think he's going to rack up the stats and the tackles and the sacks and what you need out of a defensive asset in IDP. He's going to disturb backfields. He's going to push that center right into the quarterback's lap, and he's going to make it a lot easier for his teammates. But I don't know. You don't get points in IDP leagues for making things easier for your teammates, unfortunately. So he would be a guy that I would fade because I think maybe more inexperienced players see that first round capital and they go, oh, I got to have this guy on my roster. He's going to be money in an IDP league. And I just don't think you're going to see the reward for the investment that you're going to have to put into him.
Yeah, I like that. He's a better player for real life rather than fantasy. I think, as you said earlier, and I completely agree. So we got a pretty sharp group here. So I love that. so how about you, Steve? You got anyone you're targeting or fading on the Eagles?
I'll touch on the hot button running back issue. Everyone seems to be in on Kenny Gainwell. He's a best ball darling, so I think his ADP is probably actually a lot higher in best ball than it's going to even end up in redraft. But still got August is a long month for drafting. And then fading Miles Sanders, he seems really unhappy. I don't know what is going on there. You expect him to at least fall into the end zone a couple times this year, but man, it just seems like he's being kind of squeezed out there. So fading him. On IDP side, I really like obviously James Bradbury. I think he's almost the opposite, right? I think for real football, people are a little too excited for him. He's a tackling machine. I think I've seen him with like an 80, 85 tackle season. That means you're getting targeted all the time and completing those passes to make a tackle. So he's good. He's good, but I think he's a better IDP fantasy asset than real football player. So I'm in on him because we got Slay on the other side. He's more of your true shutdown guy. Isn't going to get you necessarily a ton of tackling stats. Of course, a few picks here and there, but Bradbury's the one who gets targeted all the time, so he's going to have a lot more opportunities there. I think I'm fading, obviously, anyone in the safety position for the Eagles. So for some IDP stuff there.
No, but again, it's a really good distinction to make for people who just know the name but might not know like the role. Like you would think, oh well, you got to get Darius Slay. Well, but not necessarily because he's not going to get the ball. Like you said, that opportunity might not be there. So again, that insight is just tremendous. So I think that's good. For me, from a dynasty perspective, I am absolutely targeting Jalen Hurts anywhere I can, any way I can at this point. Obviously, it is a big year for him because if he can show that he can improve, especially on the deep ball passing accuracy, I think it would be foolish for the Eagles to go another direction. Obviously, if he's making strides and he's already made the playoffs in year 2, so on and so forth. So I'm very much all in on Jalen Hurts at this point. Kenneth Gainwell, I'm also in on. I just mainly because I just don't know what to do with Miles Sanders because I think he is such a capable player, but they just implement this like committee approach, and they have since like the Chip Kelly days, like the way of like how Brian Westbrook was used years ago just has not been the case in a very long time, which is very frustrating for fantasy purposes, but probably for the best of these players' career and like in real life. So I'm very into Gainwell, just possibly at the thought of the Eagles not re-signing Sanders to a second
There's
contract.
no chance, right?
I mean,
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I really just can't imagine. But he is still a good player. So I think, if you want a talented back, I think he will still have opportunity. I think Darren and I have talked about that in the past. So if you want to touch on that later, that's fine. But yeah, so Gainwell for Dynasty, Nakobe Dean for Dynasty as well. I just think he could be a big difference maker as a linebacker. And then for redraft, I'm targeting at all of them. For me, it is just a lot more fun to have a couple Eagles on your teams. But then again, I was very into Jalen Rager just as a late round opportunity based player, and I had him like literally in every high stakes league, every like Scott Fishbowl, everything. So it was a rough year for me from a Jalen Rager perspective. I mean, it became an easy drop eventually, but still. So sometimes it can really bite you. But either way, generally speaking, I just have more fun when I have some Eagles on my rosters. As far as fades go, Dynasty, really none. But if I had to pick one, as I said before, it would be Miles Sanders, but of course not due to his ability. If I have him in some leagues, I'm happy to hold him, but I'm not necessarily going out of my way to buy him or necessarily target him in a startup if I'm doing one today, unless the price is right. Of course, I'll take him as like my RB3, RB4. If that's even possible, I'd be happy with that. Then redraft fades, none. Again, I'm just happy to have a couple Eagles, in my lineups. I'm still very into Goddard, still very into Devonta Smith, as we've all said. So, yeah. Anyone else have anything to add to that?
I just wanted to add that if you're in a dynasty league or if you're looking for a late round redraft pick, I think at least in dynasty, Boston Scott should be owned still. If Sanders happens to go down, I think Boston Scott is the guy there. People love Kenny Gainwell, but I still think he's more of a third down role, passing role back, and I think Scott would be the guy to step up in there if something happens to Sanders. And also Quez Watkins, he needs to be owned in all dynasty leagues. If he's somehow out on your waiver still, go pick him up. He's a really talented player. He's solidified himself as a wide receiver 3 on the team. And yeah, I think those guys definitely need to have at least a little bit of attention in this offense.
I'll go in on that too. I love Quez Watkins, especially in best ball. I mean, he's the perfect best ball player because, from week to week, am I going to feel comfortable putting Quez in my lineup? Probably not. But if we're playing best ball and he has 2 receptions for, 83 yards and a touchdown, that's exactly what you want out of a best ball, asset. So put him on the back end. You can get him probably in like the 20th round because no one's looking at him. And he's almost got that like Deshaun Jackson like upside where he may not be a big part of the game plan. He's not going to get a lot of attention. He's not going to get a lot of targets, I should say. But when he gets them, he's got that speed that he could take one to the house at any point. So he's ideal for best ball, I think. I would totally agree with that.
I love that. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I'll push back on the Jalen Hurts love in Dynasty.
Perfect.
I guess I'm like a half fader or more of like a seller. So if I already own him, then let's talk super flex where quarterbacks matter, right? I'm hoping he balls out this year, and I am cashing in. That's my plan for Jalen Hurts. He's going way too high for me in startups. Just the reliance on the legs there, and if you're playing with, you know, Scott Fishbowl type scoring where completion percentage is really important, not throwing interceptions is really important, not taking sacks is really important.
6-point passing TDs as well.
Yeah.
Definitely
Then
makes a difference.
I just don't love him in that format, really. I guess in the standard format, I'm kind of more indifferent, but in a league that really sticks it to bad quarterback play, I think I'm more of a fader.
No, I like it. Yeah, because it is that this really seems like the shine on him could be the
Yeah.
brightest it
Can you
is.
step it up?
Right.
Mhm.
So, if you're on one side of the coin and the other, I really can't argue with that perspective. I guess part of that is like my optimism, and then
Of
yours is
course.
the pessimism, for sure. But that's what makes dynasties so
Yeah.
fun and so nuanced. It's like a decision like that could like really set you back or could really
Mhm.
bump you up. So no, I appreciate the perspective, and now I'm sweating because I really look up to you and your advice. So I don't know now, but yeah, no, I think it really does hinge on how he plays this year. Because again, if he's successful enough for the Eagles organization, I think they'll want to keep bringing him back and
Sure.
build around him still.
Yeah.
But again,
Yeah.
if it's another season where he still is flawed as a passer and going through his reads and his progressions, they have a lot of draft capital not only this year but also next year. It may not be the worst idea to you know like leverage that to the
Mhm.
betterment of the team. So again, I just objectively speaking, I am just very intrigued by how this is going to play out. But then, as a Eagles fan, obviously, all the more intrigue and all the more hopefully suffering that we can avoid, right?
Right.
But yeah,
I think I mean in my opinion, I probably agree more with Santa up there. I
okay,
think I, I'll say I'm not negative on Jalen Hurts.
Right.
I
I
want
don't
to be
want to.
clear on that
Yeah.
because if you're at all critical, you're a hater and everybody comes after you and you're in the hot seat. So I'm not that person. But I think what the Eagles have shown you from a front office standpoint, this whole season is a referendum on him as a passer. They want to see him pass. That's why AJ Brown's here. That's why Zach Pascal's here. That's why they did everything that they did because he's got a year left on his rookie deal, and they've got to decide, is he the guy or is he not the guy? And Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, is insistent on a passing game being important and central to their offense. I remember hearing an anecdote. I don't know if you guys remember. This was like a couple of years ago. They had a primetime game against the Packers. I think it was like a Thursday night game or something. It was that one where the corner came in off the bench and made like an interception on Aaron Rodgers, like in the end zone, and they won the game. But they had like a ton of rushing offense in that game. And everybody finished the game and it was like jubilant. We're all excited. And Jeffrey Lurie went to at that time to Doug Peterson and said, "Why are you running it so much?" Not like, "Hey, good job, coach. Congratulations. I'm so excited." Like, I want to know why there's so much rushing stats on that stat sheet. And
It's like
so
the
that tells
anti
you the
Pete
mentality
Carroll.
of the ownership. Like, he doesn't want you to run that ball. He wants passing. And so, I mean, if you look at last season, I think they were what, like 2-6 after the Oakland game. They were like, they started off really rough. It was not looking good for Sirianni or Hurts. And then Sirianni pivoted and said, we got to change this offense. He's not getting it as a passer. We've got to incorporate what he does best, which is to run. And then they took off and they, went on that like stretch run where they got themselves into the playoffs. But I don't think the ownership is content to let them do that again, to let Sirianni run that style of offense. So Jalen's going to have to prove it with his arm. And if he comes out and just defaults to, making shoddy progressions and taking off every time there's a hint of pressure in the backfield, it might get people excited. It might be great for fantasy points, but I don't think he's going to be the answer long term. So that's why I get worried about him as a dynasty asset, because if the ownership doesn't believe in him and they're not going to invest in him in long term, then why am I, as a dynasty owner, why should I feel confident in him or invest in him in the long term? I mean, I think he'll end up on a team somewhere. He's too talented, right? He's not going to be out of the league or a second stringer somewhere, but I
yeah,
don't know if he's going to be doing it for the Eagles. And then once you leave a situation where you've been successful, then is he the same player on the Texans? I don't know. Like, I don't know if he's a QB1 in Houston, whereas he definitely was in Philadelphia last year. So he's got more volatility, I think, than people give him credit for, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I don't know that that's always baked into his price right now.
yeah. No, I would tend to agree with those concerns for sure. But it is an interesting question. Like if you put him on like another team, is he still like a QB1? I think he still has a solid floor of the rushing, as long as as long as that is encouraged, and implemented in whichever offense. But yeah, it definitely it definitely is a very interesting turning point in his career. It's been a very fascinating one up to this point. But yeah, I can't wait to see how it plays out. But guys, I appreciate you coming on. I think we nailed it here. I think we have very realistic expectations for both fantasy and for real life. So again, appreciate you coming on. And what we're gonna do is just kind of go around, reintroduce yourselves, where people can find you, and then share any type of content that you have coming out. We'll start with you, Steve.
Yeah, Steve Thomason. I go by Dynasty Santa on Twitter. Pretty much live there, so my DMs are open. Pretty much, the whole reason I'm taking this journey into this industry. I just really love talking shop and talking through fantasy football, trying to help people win, give people the best advice, and just talk through decision making, which is why I love our idpguys.org Discord so much. If you become a subscriber, you get full access to that, and full access to our staff. So not only my brain, but lots of other brains that might be a hell of a lot smarter than I am. So that's my spiel.
Awesome. Yeah, I do encourage everyone to follow Steve and get in on that subscription. All right, Darren.
So my name's Darren. You can find me on Twitter at FFBirdGang. I'm going to be dropping an article this week on DynastyProsFootball.com. So check that out if you get a chance. And also the social media for Dynasty Pros on Instagram is at DynastyProsFF. So check me out over there too. And like Steve said, my DMs are always open. Tag me in your trade polls. Ask for my opinion. I'm completely willing to give my opinion, whether it's right or wrong. I will tell you how I feel.
Awesome. All right, Jason.
Jason Snyder. I'm senior writer over at Dynasty Nerds. Do a lot of work with the IDP guys. Love what you guys have going on over there. I think the feeling's mutual because you keep asking me to come back. So if you haven't kicked me out yet, I'm going to keep showing up. I likewise very active on social media. You can find me at Spide78, as we talked about earlier. Love anything having to do with fantasy football. Always happy to participate. Again, I thank you, Steve, for having me as part of your panel here. It was a blast talking birds with you guys, and love to do it anytime.
Perfect. Yep. And again, I picked these guys specifically because one, they're all great to interact with. Two, they all are really great fantasy football players and thinkers, and just overall pleasant people to interact with. And the best part is they're all Eagles fans. So that is what brought us all together here tonight. So best of luck, guys, with your fantasy teams, and go Birds, fly Eagles, fly. Thanks for coming on, and keep climbing.